having some issues, so I'm doing this on my phone. Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, good evening, and thank you so much for joining me. It is a pleasure to once again have an opportunity to learn with you in this virtual setting. Tonight's topic, of course, as we get closer to Shavuos, really just 2 weeks away. I'm sorry, 2 days away, that is. Tonight we counted the 48th day of the Omer. So it is, it's a time that naturally we hopefully are thinking about Torah, our relationship with Torah. And I wanted to share with you some highlights, excerpts of an essay of Rav Lichtenstein, Zichrono Livracha, whose 50th yard site was just recently, last month. And in his very unique style, he is able to offer so much breadth and perspective on really three words, Aseh Torah Keva. And I found it to be incredibly enlightening, very inspiring. And he shares, and I'd like to share with you through his perspective and through his writing, so many different ways to appreciate what it means that Torah should be keva in our lives. Now, in case anybody wants me to translate those words, I'm not going to translate them yet because I want you to see the way the great Gaon Rav Lichtenstein is able to look at that word from so many different perspectives and angles. So what I'm going to do with you is share with you my sheet. Make the top disappear, so we'll get to see a little more. I'm gonna come, maybe bounce a little back and forth between the sheet. And if anybody, I didn't send it to you, but if anybody would like a copy of it afterwards, because you may actually want to have a chance to read some of this over. There's a lot of English on the sheet because his article was written in English. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to share with you. So there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, a fairly well-known Mishnah, which says as follows: Shammai Omer, Shammai says, and then Shammai goes on to teach us three things. Number one, Aseh Torah Keva, which of course is the topic of tonight's discussion. For now, I guess we'll have to translate it. So we'll say, make your Torah keva, which could mean permanent, it can mean primary, it can mean everlasting. We'll have to see. But Aseh Torah keva, make your Torah something. Number two, Emor ma'at v'aseh harbe. The second teaching of Shammai is say a little, do a lot. There's a beautiful picture that hangs in the hall of our shul, a gift to the shul that I think was dedicated in honor of the Hertzfelds, Arthur and Esther Hertzfeld. It has their name on it, and it actually says these words: "Emor ma'at v'aseh harbe." Such an important lesson, such an important teaching. Don't say a lot, do a lot. And finally, "V'havei mekabes kol ha'adam v'sever panim yafos." We should receive each and every person with a positive, cheerful, smiley disposition. Is that right? We should have a smile on our face when we greet other people. On the surface, Shammai seems to be saying three completely separate ideas. Each of them have certainly independent value. Of course, and this is not the topic of tonight's discussion, but I would love it if you can think maybe in the back of your mind, and if I remember, maybe we can reflect on, as we talk more about what Aseh Torah Keva means, how this teaching of Aseh Torah Keva may actually relate thematically to both of these other ideas of Emor Ma'at V'aseh Harbe, V'havei mekabeles kol ha'adam v'sever panim yafos. Right? They are really three separate points, but we can understand the significance of their being sort of joined together in this one Mishnah. Many of the commentaries on Pirkei Avos do this regularly, that when you find more than one idea, more than one thought conveyed in one Mishnah Pirkei Avos, they try to understand, what is the connection, rather than just say these were like Shammai's greatest hits, and so therefore Chazal sort of incorporated it into one statement. No, there has to be something deeper. So now we're going to get right into it. What does it mean, Aseh Torah Keva? So Rav Lichtenstein does in this particular article, which is based on a shir that he gave, but he actually shows that word keva can be understood in many different ways. I didn't count, but I think at least 6 or 7 different perspectives that he shares as to what that word keva means. And each and every one of them, they're not mutually exclusive. Each and every one of them, very enlightening, and potentially very relevant. So Rashi on the Mishnah has two interpretations. The first interpretation, Rashi, of course, as he always is, very concise. Rashi says, what does it mean, Aseh Torah's keva? Shelo tehei koveya itim laTorah, el kol hayom teyaseno alecha keva. Sort of the opposite, actually, of the way we sometimes think about what it means, Aseh Torah's keva. Sometimes we think that means you should set time for learning. So Rashi says over here, Shelo tehei koveya itim laTorah. Don't set aside time for learning. El kol hayom teyaseno alecha keva. The entire day should be sort of it should be a permanent fixture. Now, on the surface, it may sound like Rashi is saying that Shammai is calling upon each and every one of us to spend our entire day learning. That would be wonderful, and maybe that would actually be more possible during a global pandemic than it would be during other times when we are coming and going and busy and going to work and have other responsibilities. But realistically speaking, most people are not able, and I would say, most people are not necessarily, as far as we know, that's not the ideal, that they should actually go ahead and set aside the entire day for Torah study. So Rav Aaron actually says that's not what Rashi means. Rather, he says Rashi is not talking about a person who spends his entire day, or even most of it, learning. But in terms of this person's attitude, his desire, what would he do were he divested of other responsibilities? He makes Torah primary. He yearns for Torah. He has never given up on it. He has never set it aside. It is always somehow, at least subliminally, part of his agenda. This is the sense of Rashi's first interpretation. Do not, quote unquote, set aside time for Torah like you set aside time for tennis. Rather, make it a permanent, important factor around which your day revolves. How much you will actually be able to learn depends on circumstances, where you are, what other responsibilities you have, etc. But in terms of your attitude, your commitment to Torah is rock solid. It is the framework through which you view your life. So I'm going to stop sharing for one moment and just say a point that may or may not already be obvious. And that is that Rav Aaron's understanding of the first pshat in Rashi and that word keva is that it should be sort of almost like the center of your life, the center of your day. And everything sort of revolves around it. So it's not as if keva means, even according to Rashi, says, don't set aside time for Torah study that you have to spend the entire day learning. There's no expectation that be the case. But unlike other discretionary activities, things that I, choose what I want to do, when I want to do it, maybe yes, maybe no, Torah should be sort of this permanent fixture. It should be a given. And that's what it means, keva. Keva means permanently fixed, something which is firmly placed as opposed to something which is, flopping all over the place and blowing in the wind. Okay? That's the first explanation of Rashi. Now let's see Rashi's second explanation and look at the way these two explanations actually almost like balance each other. Rashi then says, what does it mean? Aseh Torah's Kevin, the second explanation. Tikva lecha itim lilmod b'chol yom daled prakim ohei. Says Rashi, set aside time every day to learn 4 or 5 prakim. Now, Rashi doesn't say what is 4 or 5 prakim of what, of Torah, of Tanakh, of Mishnah. It's not even relevant. I mean, it may be relevant if you want to know exactly, you want to follow Rashi's recipe for a healthy Torah diet. But what matters at this point is not so much what does he mean 4 chapters or 5 chapters, but how Rashi is now pivoting and saying, no, Aseh Torah's means you should actually set aside time for Torah learning. And I believe that the second explanation of Rashi is a more accurate reflection of the way we typically understand what it means, Aseh Torah's keva, or more famously, the expression, kavata itim laTorah. Did you set aside time for Torah study? And look at the way Rav Aaron explains what Rashi is saying over here. Though a person may thirst for Torah, meaning, as Rashi conveyed in the first explanation, this longing still needs to be translated into practical terms. If you remain with nothing more than general thirst, it is entirely conceivable that nothing will come of it. It will remain hazy and fuzzy, but will not translate into actual Talmud Torah. This is where the second element in Rashi comes to the fore. Set aside time to learn 4 or 5 chapters a day. While you should set no upper limit to your learning, surely you cannot make do without setting a lower limit, a daily minimum. In order to give firmness to your commitment to Torah, you must set minimal designated times for learning. Thus, Rashi's two explanations do not contradict each other. The latter gives you a minimal real framework. The former gives you a direction, a thirst, a longing without setting any kind of upper limit. So very, very nice. We see, again, three words, Aseh Torahcha Keva, two explanations in Rashi, both of them sort of together providing, on the one hand, two different perspectives of what it means, Keva. The first explanation, Rashi, is that Torah should be sort of a fixture in your life, and everything should revolve around it. And while that sets no upper limit, it also sets no minimum. And then Rashi understands, almost in the same breath, Aseh Torahcha Keva means like Kavati Itim LaTorah. Don't forget to set aside time for Torah study. And Ravan points out, one of the ironies of life and human beings in general is that we are capable of having the greatest, highest aspirations in the world. We can value things tremendously, but sometimes we don't put our money where our mouth is, and we can speak about it, but we don't actually do it. And I'm wondering out loud with you, I don't know, but if we can suggest that maybe the connection to Emor Ma'at V'aseh Harbe sort of reflects, the second idea of Rashi, or maybe again the balance between the two, and that is, don't be the kind of person that just talks about how much you love Torah, because there are people. They love, I love, but and what are you learning at the moment? Or when was the last time you learned? Well, I don't always get around to it, but I love it. And to be clear, when a person says they love Torah, it could be absolutely sincere. We're not talking about a person who's just, who's just saying things, to make a positive impression. And more ma'at v'aseh harbe doesn't mean, don't be a hypocrite. Don't say things you don't mean. But it's not enough to say what you want. You have to actually claim it. You have to do it. And so therefore, I'm just again wondering if it's possible that Mord Ma'at V'aseh Harbe may actually sort of mirror the messages understood by Rashi. Okay, we good? Anybody have any questions? I don't know if you're all muted with or without your will. I don't know if you can unmute yourself. Any comments or questions? Okay. Let's go on to the, I would say, even though it says source 4, to the third explanation, what it may mean. Says the Rambam in his Parish on the Mishnah. And more, Omar, it says in the Mishnah, Aseh Talmud Torah ha'ikar. Now look, already what the Rambam does. The Rambam, again, it's an explanation. He's interpreting the word keva as being ikar. That's very interesting. Ikar or ikar means something which is primary, and often the opposite of ikar, or we sometimes say ikar, is tafel, something which is secondary. He says, so the Rambam says, Aseh Talmud Torah ikar, v'chomashe zulaso me'askecha ba'acharav, anything else that you have in terms of your own other business dealings or obligations should be secondary. In his damein, if you have the opportunity to do it, great. Your attitude should be, listen, if I don't get around to doing it, okay, I'll do it another time. Says Rav Aaron, it may be the axiological centrality of Torah will not necessarily translate into its being quantitatively that to which you devote most of your time. When one plans his personal budget, or when a government plans a national budget, there is little disposable income left after one has factored in the various expenses and necessities of life. Similarly, after one factors in the time he must devote to fulfilling his responsibilities and obligations, how much free time is left? But the test is precisely what a person does with whatever time is left to him. He doesn't have a choice about going to work. He has to make a living. When he comes home, he can decide whether to read the paper and watch television, whether to sit down and learn. Here, the question of what is primary and what is secondary comes to the fore. So very interesting. The Rambam understands a little different, or maybe actually if we spend a little more time on it, it's actually very different than the way we saw it with Rashi. But Ikar, Keva says the Rambam means Ikar. It has to be the primary priority in your life. And again, just as Rashi is saying that it doesn't mean that you need to be spending the entire day learning, Rambam is saying that as well. He's acknowledging that there may be other obligations I have in my life, but this should be sort of primary, and all else is is secondary. Okay? All right. Now, I'll share with you another explanation. This comes from the Avos D'Rabbeinu Nassim, not transitory. What does that mean? Asay Torascha Keva. Asay Torascha Keva. Ketzad. What does that mean? Melamed says, Avos D'Rabbeinu Nassim, this we learn from here. Shimshama Adam Davar Mipi Chacham Bebeis HaMedrash. If a person hears a word of Torah, a person hears a nice thought, a Torah thought, from a Chacham in the Beis Medrash. Al yase oso arai, el yase oso keva. I want you to appreciate this before I forget to say it, so I'm going to interrupt myself right now. And now we have introduced yet another word, and that is the word arai. Now, you may be familiar, particularly when it comes to certain halachos, sukkah, of course, being one of the most prominent ones. There's a concept of keva and arai, right? We say that for 7 days, a person should make his living in the sukkah be what's called a diras keva, and the living in my home should be what's called a diras arai. We speak about achilas keva and achilas arai. This is different than ikar and tafel. And it's interesting to see that the words that we would sometimes, sort of in our mind without thinking about, we'd sort of put it all together. But for the sake of precision right now, we should point out it's a little different. Keva, in this way, it almost seems as if obviously Rabbeinu Nassim is saying, I should try to make it permanent or eternal. Again, getting back to what it says over here, if I hear something in the Beis Medrash, al yase oso orai. I shouldn't make it arai, meaning something which is temporary. El yase oso keva. Umashalom adam yasev yilami lacherim. If I learn something, first of all, I should do it, and I should teach others. Shenemar, as it says, that's in source number 7. Vayikra Moshe kol Yisrael. Moshe called the people, Vayomer alim Shema Yisrael esachukim mishpatim asher anochi dover be'ozneichem hayom. Listen carefully to the mitzvahs of the Torah. Ulun madatem osam. Study them, and the way we see over here, ushmartem, and observe them, la'asosam, in order to do them. But the obviously Rabbi Nassim is saying over here, it means study it, teach it, and do it. V'chein be'ezer hu omer, it says also, Ki hechin levavo lidrosh es Hashem la'asos. V'achar kach, and afterwards it says, Ululamed Yisrael chok mishpat, as it says below. So we're talking over here about a commitment to Torah to make it against something which has sort of almost like, again, this sort of permanent fixture in my life. And look what Rav Aaron writes. This is what Ezra did. And this is what each person needs to do within his own environment. As part of his or her historical and social responsibility, if you have learned some Torah, Ya'aseh v'yilamid acher, observe it and teach it to others. If you are in a community where Torah is in danger of disappearing, see to it that it does not disappear. Make it kavua. I mean, the kaviyas over here is not in terms of my own schedule. It's not in terms of my own priorities in life. It's that I am trying to make Torah kavua. Make it clear that there is no vanishing American, English, or French Jew. Judaism is here to stay. It is your responsibility to make it clear to yourself and to others that Torah and Avodas Hashem are the very backbone of Judaism. Prove that all the sociological projections about the end of Jewish people are nonsense. We are Keva. So that's a very interesting perspective. Once again, different than what we had seen beforehand. So I hope you're appreciating the way Rav Aaron is able to go ahead and highlight so many different interpretations to Chazal as to what this one word keva means, and they're different. It means in terms of my own priorities, in terms of my own schedule, in terms of the idea of ikar v'tafel, making it primary as opposed to secondary. And now we see keva milashon kviyas, that it be something which is permanent as opposed to the opposite, something which is arai. Now I just want to take a moment to digress. It's not in a digression, but I do want to take a moment to just talk about the point that was just made, and that is that one of the ways that we show, that we demonstrate a sort of commitment to Torah is by teaching it. Now, many of us are not teachers of Torah in any formal sense. I'm looking around, I don't see everybody, but looking around, there are some people over here who either on a regular basis professionally, or some people on a less formal basis will actually go ahead and give, let's say, a public address, a shir on a topic, or lead a chabura But we have to understand that this idea of being a teacher of Torah doesn't have to be that I am either interested or qualified or feel that I have, the ability to go ahead and to even attract an audience. To be a teacher of Torah in today's world merely means loving Torah enough, caring about it enough, and wanting to share it with even if it's with one other person. And what comes to mind, there's a mission Perkei Avos, I don't remember what parak it's in, but there's a mission which teaches in Lamadato Torah Harbe, Al Tachzik Tov Liatzmacha Ki Lakachno Tzarta, which literally means if you've studied a lot of Torah, you've learned a lot of Torah, I mean, I would say literally, the way it's usually interpreted is Al Tachzik Tov Liatzmacha, which means don't pat yourself on the back. Don't you think you're so special? Ki Lakachno Tzarta. That's why you were created. Why do you think God put you in this world? Put you in this world to learn. So you learn. So what are you going to do? You're going to give yourself a big l'chaim? Now that's a very harsh Mishnah when you think about it. And not only is it a little, it's not very motivating. Usually when when you want to encourage somebody, you say, "Hey, great job!" You make a siyum when we make a whole party for you, and so do it again. But over here, the Mishnah is saying, if you learned a lot, don't think you're so great. You're not so hot. But furthermore, it's a little strange because it should be exactly opposite. I mean, if I am fulfilling the purpose of my creation, then that's a great thing. Then I should be machzik tov liatzmi, right? So I think the Avodas Yisrael in this parish on Perkei Avos has a beautiful, beautiful shot. And every once in a while you hear something, and you can never forget it, and you can never even look at in this case, the Mishnah the same. This is something I heard years ago, but I can never look at the Mishnah any other way anymore because it just completely transformed for me the way I look at the Mishnah. He says like this: if you've been zocha to learn a lot of Torah, al tachzik tova liatzmacha. Don't hold on to that tova, the tova being the Torah. Ki lekach tov nasati lechem. Latzmacha for yourself. What are you holding on to for yourself? Ki lekach no tzarta. The purpose of your creation, the reason you're here is to what? Lilmod ulalame, to share it. So it's very beautiful. It's not saying don't pat yourself on the back. Al tachzik means don't hold on to it. Don't hold on to that Torah. Share the Torah because there are other people who can benefit from it as well. There are other people who can be inspired. And sometimes with just a nice, it doesn't require as I had a professor in Israeli, Professor. Blanking right now. Oh, he was the great leader of the Yeshiva Flatbush for many years. Anyway, blanking on his name. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. So he said Rebbetzin Rosenzweig's father. Anyway, so Eliach, Professor Eliach, thank you. So he used to say every lesson has to begin with a motivatia, right? I'm sure you know what the word motivatia means, right? And he was very makbid. You can't just go ahead and start a lesson in Chumash, say, okay, everybody open your Chumash to Perek Gimel. Just like a rabbi can't start a drasha saying in this week's parsha. That's the kiss of death. By the time you get to the next sentence, everybody's sleeping. You need a motivatia. But that's only true when you're addressing a crowd. That's only true when you're in front of a big audience. If you're standing online, if you're on the phone with somebody, or if you're sitting at the Shabbos table, it doesn't require, a whole introduction and a fancy beginning. You don't have to start with a joke and tell a good story. Al tachzik tov liatzmacha. Just go ahead and to share a nice Torah thought, and it's a great way to sort of interact with other people. And again, really on a certain level, that is the way. Obviously, Rabbi Nassim says that is the way we demonstrate asay Torah's chakeva. That's the way we do it. We do it by what? By demonstrating that this is something which is such a permanent part of my life and our existence that I am going to share it with others, which just solidifies and strengthens that permanence. Okay? The next explanation is also from the Avos Rabbeinu Nassim. And it's actually a different way the Rav Aaron explains that very same sentence that we saw. Asay Torah's chakeva, ketzad. Melamed shema adam davar mipi chacham beis hamedrash al yasos oraya al yasos okeva. Right, that same Same sentence that we saw before. If a person heard a nice Torah thought, don't make it a rai, rather make a keva. So here Rav Aaron says that there are things to which a person is committed to the degree that he wants them to be part of him. When he has that kind of experience, he wants it to be internalized, not to remain ephemeral. This is what the Brisa tells us regard to the Torah. Asay Torah's keva. See to it that it is ingrained and absorbed, that it becomes part of you. This, of course, has implications for the nature of the experience at that time. A person who hears a symphony and wants it to become part of his musical repertoire will listen to it differently than a person for whom it is only so much background music. It is a different kind of exposure and experience. There is a certain intensity and a seriousness. If you want something to remain with you, you must immerse yourself in it. So the idea being that Asay Torah Keva means that I should try to internalize it. And over here, I would actually highlight a different word, and not the word keva, but what's that word right beforehand? Torascha. Make your Torah keva. What makes it your Torah? How does it become my Torah? So again, he's saying by sort of a conscious effort to internalize it, that this is something that I want to think about, so it shouldn't just be something interesting, like you said, sort of like background music, which, fulfills a certain purpose, but ultimately, if I really, want to internalize it, so it has to be my Torah. The idea of my Torah, we say all the time in our davening, that Hashem should be saying Chalkeinu b'Sarah Secha. You should give us our chelek in Torah. Each and every one of us has a chelek, almost like a portion that is designated for us, for me. And when we make it keva, that means that we internalize it. And regarding this, Rav Aaron directed our attention to the famous Gemara in Shabbos, which tells us, I'm a Rava, B'shah shemachnisin adam ladin, when a person appears on his day of judgment. Omrim lo, there are 6 questions that this person is asked. Famous first question is, were you honest in business? The second one, kavati itim laTorah, did you set aside time for Torah study? Even though, again, note that word kavata, in light of all that we've seen already so far, there probably are many other ways to interpret those words. Asakta b'pirya v'rivya, did you try to build a family? Tzipisa l'yeshua, did you yearn for the salvation? Pilpalta b'chachma, which means that you sort of plumbed the depths of wisdom of Torah, hivanta davar mitoch davar, and did you try to differentiate between different types of different kinds of knowledge, which he's going to talk about a little more what that means in a moment. The Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah teaches, Kol ish miYisrael chai b'Talmud Torah, ben ani, ben ashir, ben shalim begufo, ben bal yasurin, ben bachor, ben shehu zaken, gadol, shetashach kocho. Says the Rambam, everybody has to study, regardless of a person's economic and social standing, whether a person is in good health and poor health, whether a person is young or old, even if a person is so poor that they require others to support them. Says the Rambam, if a person has responsibilities with a family, person has to set time for Torah study. Says Rav Aaron, one is not just obligated to study, but to set a fixed time for study. Why is this important? When you think about why is that necessary? Why don't Chazal say that they ask you, so did you learn? Did you learn? They don't ask you, did you learn? They ask you, kavati itim l'Torah. Why is that important? Because when a person is kavati itim l'Torah, he has indicated that Torah is a permanent place in his life. It is not one of those things which I'd like to do if I have time. A person who enjoys playing basketball will play if he has time, but he won't if he doesn't have time. On the other hand, there are certain things that you do regularly because you understand that these are part of your very being. The question is, how is Torah going to fit into a person's life experience? Will it be like reading a fine novel, or it will be like one's regular daily schedule? Will it be very essence of his being? Kavati itim l'Torah thus suggests kvius, not only in terms of making the time for it, but also in terms of what remains with you from your learning. What are you trying to accomplish when you learn? Is it enough to have gone through the motions, like going for a swim or a walk? The Brisa is talking about kev in the sense of making a part of you. If you forget, you forget. You are considered honest. It's not your fault. But ideally, you should strive to build up an otzer, a treasury of Torah, and have it remain with you forever. So I'm not even counting. I think that was the 5th explanation of Asay Torah Keva means to internalize it. This may be 6 and 7. I think there may be a total of 7. The layman's obligation. In certain respects, this is an extraordinary demand, because one might have thought you can ask an ordinary person to engage in Talmud Torah, to be in touch with Torah, but you cannot ask the average person to internalize his learning into something which is permanent. In other areas, we assume that there is great difference between professional scholars and those who have a dilettante, you'll tell me if later if I pronounce this right, dilettantish interest, and maybe even a love for a certain field. We don't expect of the latter to try to build up a permanent repertoire of knowledge. A professional scholar would read books, take notes, and compare the different works he has studied. A music expert may remember symphonies and conductors and compare them, examining the respective styles and interpretations. But an ordinary person just wants to enjoy himself when he goes to a concert. However, regarding Talmud Torah, the demand on the average person is really to make it a permanent part of himself. He cannot simply attend a shir and think, fine, I'll hear the shir, it'll be a nice experience, he's a good speaker, I'll enjoy it, I'll be enlightened, I'll go home. You cannot treat it in the same manner as if you were going to the theater. So actually this was a continuation of the previous thought, that the idea of internalizing Torah means not just that my approach to Torah is one that, this is important to me, so I'm going to listen, but understand that even though I am not a quote unquote professional, even though I don't see myself as a scholar, even though I'm not, even imagining that I'm ever going to be giving, a high level shir or anything like that, every person, to the best of their ability, is required to, again, try to internalize Torah, to make it such a part of them that they really, we try to master it in that regard. And this is, again, what it means, Aseh Torascha Kava. And I believe, finally, we'll see. We'll see how much we'll do together. Plumbing the depths. Take a look what the Rambam says in Hilchos Talmud Torah. V'chayiv l'shalish izman l'midaso. A person has to divide the time that they study into three parts. Shlish b'torah shebachsav, shlish b'torah shebapeh. 1/3 is Tanakh, right? 1/3 is learning Mishnah, as an example, Torah shebapeh. Ushlish yavin v'yaskil achris davar merishisa. And 1/3 is to try to contemplate and to understand the way things begin, the way they end. Try to put sort of everything together in our minds. V'yotzi davar mitoch davar, and to learn to sort of extract concepts and principles. And learn how to apply those principles, as well as the principles to which the Torah is darshan. Basically, he says what we call Gemara, we mean understanding the process of halacha, how Torah evolves from earlier sources, and how Chazal were able to extrapolate and to take ideas based on the principles to which Torah is to be interpreted. Then the Rambam says, when is this true that a person should divide his schedule into three parts? This is when a person is early on in their learning career. A person reaches a certain madrega where they don't have to spend 1/3 of their time studying Chumash and Mishnah. So then you could be itim uzumanim Torah shebachsav v'divrei hashmua kadei shelo yishkach tovim v'divrei Torah. He says, yeah, obviously you have to review it from time to time. However, you find a kol yamav legemara bavad lefi rochav sheyesh b'libo v'yishuv daito. A person should devote himself almost exclusively to the study of Gemara, again, commensurate with the person's abilities, both in terms of their state of mind and state of spirit, how much of a capacity they have. And Rav Aaron says here, Gemara means not necessarily a particular text, but rather an approach to and perspective on learning. It means studying in depth, not just reviewing dicta. Of course, at some point, a person may require basic knowledge, but in terms of your ideal, where do you want to go? Do you want to be left with just raw knowledge? This is not the kfiyas of Torah. This is not an internalization of Torah. And this is not striving for the vaharevna that we pray for every morning, a sense of love and pleasure in Torah. The fullness and the richness in Talmud Torah is and that was the question, Popalta b'chachma, the Hivanta davar mitoch davar. Those were questions 5 and 6 that the Gemara says that a person is asked on the Yom Adin. If one strives to master the complexity, the depth, the range of Torah, then he attains Keva in its fullest sense, not just by skimming the surface, but by plumbing the depths. So here, Rav Aaron teaches that based on the Avos Rabbeinu Nassan, that the idea of, and through the prism of the Rambam explaining how a person should prioritize and set their schedule in learning, that internalizing Torah manifests itself in the manner that a person learns, what we sometimes call in yeshiva like a derech halimud, not merely skimming the surface, not just sort of sitting back and just trying to acquire lots of pieces of trivia and Torah knowledge in just in a general sense, which of course is important. You know, some of you may be familiar with two different terms that are sometimes used to describe different modes of learning in yeshiva. Sometimes people learn what's called bekios, and sometimes iyun. Bekios means, it doesn't necessarily mean this literally, but that, refers to a style of learning in which a person is covering a lot of ground, but spending less time in analysis. And iyun means to spend more time on a smaller amount of text, but doing so in a way in which a person can analyze it further. What Rav Aaron's saying over here is the kviyas of Torah requires a sort of commitment, plumbing the depths of Torah, which ultimately is what allows a person to achieve the sense of joy, the vaharevna. I don't know if you ever thought about it. I'm sure some of you, maybe all of you have, but every morning, the Birchos Torah that we recite, there's a lot to say about Birchos Torah, but we have an explicit request of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make Torah learning sweet. Vaharevna Hashem Elokeinu es divrei sos chabefinu. That is the only mitzvah in which we ask Hashem to make the performance of this mitzvah sweet, pleasant, that it should be enjoyable. We all have, I imagine, mitzvahs that we enjoy doing naturally, and some which we enjoy less. But we don't ask God to go ahead and to make mitzvahs pleasurable and joyful for us. Hopefully they are, but we don't ask for that. When it comes to the study of Torah, so we specifically say Vaharevna, we ask that it should become sweet, but Rav Aaron is reminding us that this is something that we develop through our efforts. And actually we'll conclude with this last segment of his essay. I know many are troubled by the question of how to develop the requisite passion and yearning for Torah. People would like to find some formula which would enable one to attain this automatically. I can't speak of any formula, but I think there are certain directions which can be mentioned. Perhaps it is most important to stress that it is not a phenomenon we can regard in isolation. The extent to which a person is committed to Torah is very much a function of his commitment to God, and therefore it is related to some place of Avodas Hashem and Yiras Hashemayim within his life generally. There may be some people who simply have a fancy, as it were, for Torah. But for most people, if the depth of Yiras Hashemayim is lacking, then it is unlikely that of all the things to which they expose, specifically the Talmudic passage of an ox which gores is going to interest them most. There is a circular relation between Yiras Hashemayim and cleaving to Torah. The more you have the one, the more you have the other. One needs to develop a certain dynamic between these two. Inasmuch as a person is involved with Torah because he sees it as a divine, as Torah Hashem, then the extent to which he relates to God is also going to have a great impact on how he relates to Torah. It would be difficult for me to say that one thing will be effective for everyone and that one should adopt only one approach to tackling the problem. It is a complex issue, but I think a person surely needs to recognize that we must address ourselves to it. Maybe at one time people lived in a world where all of this occurred through osmosis. However, most of us do not live in a world which breathes Torah all the time. That being the case, a person has to work on this in a way that at one time he didn't need to. So, I guess there's one more paragraph over here. So with your permission, we'll just read it together. In summation, when we speak about Torah as a central value, we are dealing with both a quantitative and a qualitative question. Because remember, we started with the question, what does it mean? Asay Torah's keva. And we basically saw that keva means quantitatively and qualitatively and beyond. It means that Torah has to become a central key fixture in my life. So we are dealing with both. Quantitatively, how much time and effort does a person devote to it? This question applies both in terms of how many years he devotes to it on a full-time basis and in terms of how much he devotes to it daily or weekly once he started working. Although we believe that echad ha'marva v'echad ha'mamit, whether one does a little or a lot, What truly matters is that he should direct his heart to the heaven. That doesn't mean that it is a material whether you are marbe or mamit. To the contrary, it is very material. Both is a reflection of what your values are, and it's something which subsequently molds and shapes those values. Moving to the qualitative level, a person is asked to make Torah the central to his life, to see that it is a kviyut, a permanence, and is not just somewhere on the periphery. It should have a kviyut with his own life, and also kviyut within his society, within his historical situation, analogous to Ezra. In practical terms, the element of keva means that minimally, one has certain designated time frames for which such that his is not simply adventitious, but rather fundamental and inherent to one's schedule. Furthermore, kviyut means making Torah into one's framework and planning everything else around that, rather than planning everything else and sticking in a bit of Torah in the remaining space. This is, of course, a large demand, and what is significant and striking about it is that this demand is made of every Jew. One cannot allow a social setting to determine for him whether or not Torah is a place in his life. It must be clear that wherever he ends up, Torah is a central value, a framework for his life, something which is inherent in his very being. Like Ezra, he must influence his community, be it social, economic, professional, academic community, in order to make Torah kavua there as well. There is actually, as you can see on the bottom, a website. You see that this came from the etzion.org.io website, which is the virtual-based medrash from Yeshiva Har Etzion. And if you look in the essays they have on Shavuos, you will see this as part of actually a much longer essay. So if it seemed like I copied a lot of text, I did so very selectively. I think it was actually 14 or 50 pages long. But to me, that actually it's nice because it typifies, the degree to which Rav Aaron was most unique and gifted in being able to take one word, in this case keva, and really reflect upon it, so broadly, and taking a look at so many different angles and perspectives. In conclusion, as we find ourselves now less than 2 days away from the Yom Tov of Shavuos, Zman Matan Torasenu, it is an appropriate time to devote ourselves and commit ourselves to Torah study, not just in the days leading up, and certainly not just on Shavuos itself, but hopefully in a way that impacts us beyond. I've sometimes given the mashal, I don't know if it's a good one, but a person who celebrates with the Torah, let's say twice a year on Simchas Torah Shavuos, either by dancing with with Torah and Shul, or a person says I'm going to stay up all night learning on Shavuos, but doesn't display. You can't always, there are special moments in these holidays, but doesn't display any sort of meaningful commitment the rest of the year. So it's sort of like a spouse who is very neglectful of the needs of the other spouse, but is very careful to mark the anniversary, to buy a nice card, and to maybe give flowers or a gift, and each and every year shows up for the anniversary, but the day before and the day after, there's no display of that sort of love and commitment. And I think we would all agree that while it's nice that you remember the anniversary, that says something, but that you don't want that to be sort of the defining moment of a relationship. You really want the relationship to be one which is meaningful all throughout the year. And then an anniversary is that much more special. So Shavuos is Man Matan Torasenu, but it's a good moment to sort of reignite that spark and to strengthen it. And hopefully, Be'ezus Hashem will be able to do so. A reminder that tomorrow night we are encouraging the entire community to join us in really a full evening of learning, beginning at 6:45 with Mincha, followed by a Siyum Tanakh, because we started this past Simchas Torah learning as a community of Tanakh, and then a full lineup of great shiurim from guests and members of our community, and lots of options for people of all different ages and stages, going well into the early hours of the morning. That's me. I saved that for myself. That's the best one, because if I don't prepare well, nobody's going to remember the next morning what I spoke about anyway. So it's it's always the best slot to take. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. I hope everybody has a wonderful night. If you didn't do so yet, please remember to count Sfira, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you. יש כוח.
Thank you. You dress that. You know.
Safety of our customers while providing service at home pickup and in times like engine to this pin credits $2,500. These are the United States, a united people with a united purpose. Future, let's move on. A great people has been and a great nation. All of us give and extend a hand to those in need. In 1930, workers in West Virginia started construction on something called the Hawk's Nest Tunnel. The plan was to bore all the way clean through a mountain so that water could be diverted from the local river to a hydroelectric plant on the other side of the mountain. They needed to go through the mountain to do it, and in blasting through that rock in West Virginia, those workers were exposed to something called silica dust. And silica dust is nasty stuff. It causes incurable lung problems. Project started in 1930. We worked on the Hawk's Nest Tunnel dust because of exposure to silica dust. And actually, more than 760 men who worked on that project died. And this happened in the 1930s, but it's a signal moment in occupational safety, occupational risk. And still, exposure
Hi. I don't know how to get, I'm sorry, I don't know how to get out of it.
I think there's a leave button at the bottom.
Oh,
On the
okay.
right. If you want to leave, you hit
Yes.
the. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Okay. Hold on. Just- Oh my God. The leave button. Where's the leave button? Oh, I don't understand this.
Well, what's that? David, it was still on the page where, like, the closing page. What was that?
Can't seem to be able to get out of it.
Okay.
OSHA and the Trump administration has opted for voluntary guidance. The agency says no enforcement actions. So it's